From CBS News, Space Headquarters at Cape Kennedy, in color, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Harry Reasoner in New York, Eric Severide in New York, Daniel Shore in Washington, and Don Webster in Quezon.
Good evening. This morning, a rocket like this one, 224 feet tall, stood on that pad out there. Tonight, this much of it is circling the Earth in two parts. The S-4B second stage and the command and service module with Wally Schirra, Don Isley, and Walt Cunningham aboard. America is back in the race to the moon tonight, and here's what happened. 2 hours and 45 minutes before scheduled launch, the astronauts boarded the van for the 7-mile trip to Pad 34. They'd been up since 6, already had a final physical and a breakfast of steak and eggs. They headed for the pad with one small uncertainty hanging over them. The countdown was going perfectly, but the morning wind kept edging up toward the 21 miles an hour that would keep Apollo 7 from flying. 200 feet above the ground, astronauts Schirra and Cunningham made the dizzy crossing of the open catwalk to the spaceship. After they were installed, pilot Don Isley came up from below and joined them as they counted down toward launch.
5, 4, 3, 2, we have ignition. Commit liftoff. We have liftoff.
Slowly.
This is launch control. We have cleared the tower.
Roger, tower clear.
Took 5 seconds for that sound to reach us.
The whole program has commenced.
A beauty of an absolutely cloudless sky. As scheduled. It looks good. From here it looks fine. Straight and true on its course. Get a good view of it there with our long-range camera. Wally Schirra, Don Isley, Walter Cunningham, the latter two making their first space flight. Wally Schirra, his third, riding that
1 minute, 20 seconds into the flight.
big
All systems go on the ground
spacecraft
and in
forward.
the air.
The voices now of mission control changed from Jack King to
1
Paul Haney
minute,
at
40
Houston.
seconds.
They've gone through maximum dynamic pressure.
Flight director asks the flight dynamics officer if he likes it, and he says, yes, sir, it looks good.
Look at the flame. 700 gallons of RP1 and liquid oxidizer burning up there every second. That thing developing 1,600,000
Coming up on 2 minutes, mark 2 minutes. We're having a status check. Apollo 7 has been given a go for staging.
Go for staging, the separation of that first stage. That comes in about
2 minutes,
10
15
seconds from now. That's the first critical point after liftoff.
Inboard engines have shut down.
And they're staging.
Outboard engines have shut down. Schirra called both events. He's got ignition, and he says we're up to thrust on the second stage.
That is our Igor
The
long-range
thrust is
camera.
okay at 2 minutes, 40 seconds into the flight.
So the 15th consecutive successful flight of the
Well, it
S-1B,
is all
Saturn
beautiful.
1B.
That tower has really jettisoned. It went way out. We're nearly 50 miles altitude now and about 60 miles downrange.
You see the escape tower tumbling up there in the upper
3
left-hand
minutes,
side of the
5
screen.
seconds into the flight.
A few minutes later, Apollo 7 slid perfectly into orbit, and Wally Schirra reported by radio, "We're having a ball." 3 hours after launch, the command module pulled away from this second stage of the rocket, swung around to inspect this hangar. which in future missions will house a lunar landing ship, none in it on this mission. And then the astronauts discovered the first malfunction of Apollo 7. But the hangar is supposed to open in 4 panels, or 4 jaws. One jaw did not deploy properly. And on a moon landing flight, that could mean trouble, breaking out the little moon landing ship inside. Otherwise, the flight goes perfectly, and if it continues as planned, this command module will return to splash down into the Atlantic Ocean a week from next Tuesday. Meanwhile, just 8.5 miles from here, up the beach at Merritt Island, Apollo 8 sits atop its far bigger Saturn V booster, awaiting launch perhaps around Christmas time. Yesterday, we heard Werner von Braun warn that even a successful Apollo 7 flight doesn't automatically mean that Apollo 8 can reach for the moon. And it's a long way through the sky from here to a week from Tuesday. Yet, with those obvious cautions, it is safe to say this much, that except for that one little panel problem, nothing we have yet learned as of now from this beautiful flight of Apollo 7 today would prevent Apollo 8 from flying men around the moon just 2.5 months from now. This is Walter Cronkite at the CBS News Space Center, Cape Kennedy.
Late today, the astronauts were given the go-ahead for another 12 orbits, which will take them into tomorrow afternoon. The wives of Schirra and Isley watched the launch on television at their homes in Houston with relatives and friends, including the wives of some of the other astronauts. Cunningham's wife and children saw the liftoff in person from a private boat just off the Cape. CBS News, of course, will cover developments in the Apollo mission as warranted, including the first scheduled television transmission from the capsule tomorrow morning. President Johnson left Washington late this afternoon to visit former President Harry Truman. After a flight to Kansas City, the president planned to travel by car to the Truman home in Independence, Missouri. Earlier today, the president urged the Senate to ratify the stalled nuclear non-proliferation treaty before adjournment and suggested that failure to do so could mean a post-election session. Delay, the president said, could result in more nations deciding to develop nuclear capabilities.
I cannot guarantee that our early action will bring a particular nation or group of nations along with us. But I can tell you that our chance of doing so will be greatly reduced, and the world that our children will inhabit made far more perilous if we fail to act soon. As president, I cannot see this happen without at least calling to the attention of the leaders of the Senate, as I have done, the serious consequences of postponement of this action in the Senate, regardless of who requested it. I know that the pressures of the election are upon us, but so are the responsibilities that we were all elected to fulfill. And so I hope, and I can only hope, that the Senate will act now with the highest interests of the nation in mind. But if the members of the Senate find it either undesirable or impossible to remain and pass upon this treaty now, I shall, after consulting with other leaders here and in the world and leaders of the Senate, seriously consider calling the Senate into special session. I consider the adoption of this treaty that important to the security of our nation and that important to peace in the world.
In spite of that appeal, Senate Majority Leader Mansfield said he had no plan to call up the treaty before adjournment. We'll have more on that story in a moment. With only 3 weeks left in their re-election campaigns, members of Congress were preparing today for adjournment. This was one of the reasons for inaction on the nuclear treaty. Daniel Shore reports.
The 90th Congress is not exactly rushing towards adjournment in a time-honored phrase. More accurately, it is petering out towards adjournment as the members drift off with a campaign light in their eye. Last-minute pressures for action have run up against hopeless shrugs about no quorum. One such shrug came from Senate Majority Leader Mike Mansfield when President Johnson urged that the Senate act now on the treaty to check the spread of nuclear weapons. Mansfield favors delay.
Well, for one thing, I don't want it to become a political issue.
or another, it'll be most difficult to get a quorum. And I feel that while I personally would like to see it considered immediately, that the best procedure, all things considered, is to delay it until the first part of January and not to have to run the obstacle course which confronts it in the meantime.
Frustration over the Senate's shelving of a bill for a broadcast candidates debate expressed itself in a weird move among House Democratic liberals to prevent adjournment. It was outlined by James O'Hara of Michigan.
It's our intention to hold out for the public's right to see and hear these candidates. We intend to do so by refusing to participate in the vote on the resolution to adjourn this session of Congress.
But Senator Mansfield says that while he sympathizes with the frustration in the House, there is nothing that can be done. The bill is dead. And congressional veterans agree that the House liberals will not succeed in keeping the Senate in session. What kind of session has it been? Fair to middling was the best phrase that Senator Mansfield could find. And whatever kind of session it's been, it's ending with a week that included a House lock-in and a Senate stay-out. And what's been left undone will have to wait. These people want to go home. Daniel Shaw, CBS News on Capitol Hill.
The former governor of Pennsylvania, William Scranton, who's regarded as a likely Secretary of State in a Nixon cabinet, said today it would be unwise now to begin talks with the Soviet Union about curbing missiles. Scranton, who's just back from a trip to Europe for Nixon, commented after reporting his findings to Secretary of State Russ. Prices closed slightly lower in the New York Stock Exchange today. Volume was 12,650,000 shares. The exchange index lost 1 cent. In Vietnam, 26 communist soldiers were killed in a battle with American forces along the invasion corridor 27 miles northwest of Saigon, but the main body of the enemy force of 400 men managed to escape. 3 months ago, the U.S. Marines abandoned their base at Khe Sanh after breaking an enemy siege. Recently, they returned for a short visit. CBS News correspondent Don Webster reports.
After a week of marching through the Khe Sanh area, the Marines have reached a familiar point, the metal airstrip, which is about all that's left of the Khe Sanh combat base. The airstrip isn't usable anymore. Artillery shells have put large holes into it, and now even the airstrip is being taken up. Shortly after the Marines arrived here, Navy Seabees, who built the middle airstrip in the first place, came back. Now, piece by piece, they're dismantling it, so that even this last landmark will disappear. In charge of the airstrip removal is Chief Petty Officer William Stiles.
These plates that you see the Seabees pulling out now weigh about 140 pounds when they're brand new. If they're loaded with water, as they are, they're hitting about 160. That's why my boys are sweating. They go about $140. So every bit of strip you see out here is $1 a pound. That's a lot of taxpayers' money, which we hope to be able to use again at some other airstrip.
You expect someday the Seabees may have to come back here again and build this airstrip all over?
I expect to see the Seabees anywhere they're needed, and I don't know if it'll be here or where, but they'll be there if they're needed.
The Seabees aren't taking any chances. One shell hole is dug even deeper to serve as a bunker, in case, as happens so often in the past, the communists again have this airstrip zeroed in. It's not clear who made all these shell holes in the runway the past few months. The communists still have artillery positions just across the border in Laos at a place called Ko Rock. American shells may have made some of the holes. In a few places, grass has already sprouted up through the holes in the runway. In this wet, lush country, grass will probably cover the entire area once the airstrip disappears. Of the men taking up the airstrip, some used to be stationed here. They came back voluntarily to see what it looks like now.
We were stationed in Khe Sanh for 11 months, about as long as anyone. How has it changed since then?
Well, it's gotten a lot greener, and a lot of the dust is going down, and scenery looks a little bit prettier than it did a few months back.
You didn't have to come back. Why did you?
Well, I had a chance to come back home, so I figured I'd better take it while the chance is still open.
I guess you left a lot of memories here.
Yes, I had a lot when we laid down the airstrip and patching it up and now taking it back up again. I have plenty of memories of this place.
The Americans here are members of the 26th Marine Regiment, the one which was stationed at Khe Sanh through the siege. Few units in Vietnam have taken as many casualties over the years as the 26th Marines. In less than 2 months, 150 Americans died at this location and more than 1,000 were wounded, plus many other casualties on nearby hills and in the air over this region.
A high-ranking official of the Viet Cong arrived in Paris today to open an information office. He was met at the airport by leaders of the North Vietnamese delegation to the preliminary peace talks. The Viet Cong have no representatives at the talks. Czech Communist Party leader Alexander Dubček said today that it is impossible for his country to return to the hardline policies of the previous regime, and the Czech leaders had made this clear to the Soviets during the recent Moscow talks. There are reports that Premier Oldrich Chernik will fly to Moscow soon to sign a treaty legalizing the Soviet occupation and calling for the withdrawal of all but a token force, perhaps before the 50th anniversary of the founding of the Czechoslovak Republic later this month. A Moscow court today convicted 5 Russian citizens of defaming the Soviet Union by demonstrating in Red Square against the invasion of Czechoslovakia. 2 of the defendants were sentenced to labor camps for up to 3 years, and the others were banished from Moscow for as long as 5 years. 9 Cuban exiles, including 1 woman, were arrested today in Miami in connection with a wave of anti-Castro terrorism in the United States and threats against countries trading with Cuba. Federal indictments included charges of shelling a Polish freighter in Miami Harbor, an incident the United States apologized for, and threatening to blow up British, Spanish, and Mexican ships and planes. In industrial cities, today bid for the support of northern farmers. At Fargo, North Dakota, Wallace said farmers are in the worst shape since the 1930s, and he called for agricultural price supports as high as the law allows. In Dallas today, Richard Nixon called the 10% income tax surcharge a war tax and said it should be repealed as soon as possible. On another issue, Nixon criticized the courts for going too far in restricting police in handling criminals, and in his words, we must correct that imbalance. Hubert Humphrey and his running mate, Senator Edmund Muskie, appeared together at a news conference in New York today and issued a challenge to Nixon and Wallace.
Senator Muskie and I still believe that the people have the right to hear and see the issues debated by the principal candidates. We have therefore agreed to guarantee the cost of the debates. I propose that Mr. Nixon and Mr. Wallace both appear with me on 2 debates, and that Governor Agnew and General LeMay both appear with Senator Muskie in a 3rd debate. We have commenced negotiation with one of the networks this morning for an hour of prime time on Sunday night, October 20, with a debate among Mr. Nixon, Governor Wallace, and myself. And at the same time, we're asking Democrats, Republicans, and independents throughout the nation to help pay the cost for these debates.
It is said that Mr. Nixon doesn't want to debate because he's ahead. The other side of that is that he's afraid that a debate might cost him his lead. And this is the real clue to this issue of the debates. A man who is sure of himself, sure of his potential for leadership, sure of his positions on issues, need not be afraid, whether he's ahead or behind. And I think the American people ought to focus on the fact that he's afraid.
Mr. Nixon wrote in his books, 6 Crises, that, and I quote, joint TV appearances of candidates at the presidential level are here to stay, mainly because people want them, and the candidates have a responsibility to inform the public on their views from the widest possible audience, before the widest possible audience. Now, I ask Mr. Nixon to stand by that statement, which is his statement in his book.
Representatives of Humphrey inquired today about the availability of broadcast time on the CBS television network. But a Nixon spokesman said that as far as his camp is concerned, the debate issue is closed because Congress failed to act. The aide said Nixon still refuses any debate that involves Wallace and the aide declined to discuss the possibility of a Humphrey-Nixon debate. After his news conference, Humphrey canceled a campaign appearance in New York and a trip to Cincinnati because of what was called a mild case of flu. Eric Severide, who has been traveling with Humphrey, has some views on his campaign. Eric?
Democratic candidate Hubert Humphrey must win Democratic New York City big in order to take New York State, and he must take New York State if he is to have any chance at all of winning the presidency. His cause here in the big city is gathering strength, but slowly. Voter registration is below the levels of 4 and 8 years ago. The McCarthy wing of the party here spends as much energy attacking the Johnson administration, which is over, as it spends attacking Nixon republicanism, the real issue. Humphrey buttons and stickers are rarely seen in the big town, so empty are his coffers. And the candidate himself is losing the day because of illness, the latest in a remarkable series of bad breaks. They began with his late entry into the race last spring, and the rioting during the Chicago convention, the last-minute ruin of the president's carefully arranged summit meeting by the Russian invasion of Czechoslovakia, the apparent decision of Senator McCarthy to take his bat and go home, and now the success of Senate Republicans in protecting Mr. Nixon from whatever risk he might run in direct television debates with Humphrey. New York, in the lexicon of political calculation, is treated as a media city, a town for interviews, radio, television, and press. The biggest live crowd in Wall Street or in a hotel banquet hall is the tiniest fraction of the city's electorate. The important figure in the crowd is a television cameraman. He provides the significant audience. Humphrey will spend at least 3 more days campaigning in the other big vital state, California. But his chance there looks very poor, and he will have to return to New York before it's over for reinsurance. He continues to hope this is Truman versus Dewey all over again, but it continues to resemble far more Eisenhower versus Stevenson in '52. Like Eisenhower, Nixon keeps his lead in the polls, his lead in the size of the crowds, as the precious days wear on. In '52, the big majority of professional political reporters who cover both campaigns were privately for Stevenson. This time they are privately for Humphrey. That cut no ice with the voters then, probably cuts no ice with voters now. And like Stevenson, Humphrey has a way of arranging his own difficulties. Stevenson took far too much time preparing his speeches. Humphrey takes far too much time delivering his speeches. Almost invariably, he will work the friendly audience up to a pitch of enthusiasm and then cool them off and wear them out by talking another 20 minutes or so. He can not only tear a passion to tatters, he can take a finely wrought, carefully cadenced speech and ad-lib it into a formless mass. Harry?
There's one aspect of the Apollo 7 that Walter Cronkite didn't report. In Dover, England, the president of the Flat Earth Society said the astronauts are such brave men he hates to disappoint them, but that round ball they see beneath is an optical illusion. Actually, they are like the needle on an LP record, circuiting instead of orbiting around a disc-like Earth. In a way, that's reassuring, unless they fall off. The Flat Earth Society has been fighting the ridiculous idea that the Earth is round for a long time. Tomorrow is the 476th anniversary of the Columbus heresy. That's the news. This is Harry Reasoner for Walter Cronkite, who returns Monday. Good night.
In the space headquarters at Cape Kennedy in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Harry Reasoner in New York.